Millions and millions of seniors are falling victim to elder abuse every single year. That's a travesty. And it isn't just physical abuse, it is emotional and financial abuse. Would you even recognize whether you saw a senior or an elder that was being victimized? Because many of us don't. What do you look for? What can you do? And how do you stop it? Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. Welcome to Gavels Down, Voices Up, where we flip the script on conventional legal discussions. I'm Rachel King, here to guide you through the murky waters of family law, estate conflicts, inheritance disputes, all of the dramas. We're not just talking about law, we're talking about how it affects your life, your rights, your future, and your money. From the courtroom to your living room, we bring you insights that matter. Dive into each episode ready to challenge, learn, and grow. Ready to change the dialogue? Let's begin. Gavels down, voices up. Today, we're going to talk about elder abuse because, quite frankly, it's not talked about often enough. I would say, as a probate litigator, almost 75% of my cases are those that have some element of elder abuse. That's huge, and it can be prevented. So today we're going to talk about how to notice it and what you can do. Interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, most elder abuse is committed by, right? The abuser is somebody that's very close to the senior. This could be a family member, which is very, very common, or a caregiver. And while, of course, based on my own experience, physical elder abuse is a thing, I have to say, in all of the cases that I've handled, that is not the primary issue. Most elder abuse that I've seen in cases that I've either been part of or have watched include emotional elder abuse or financial elder abuse. So real quick, because physical elder abuse is a thing, let's talk about that. The times that I've seen it, of course, physical abuse is where you're actually doing something harmful, like punching, holding, grabbing. If you're taking something out of an elder's hands, I once had somebody who committed physical elder abuse by removing a chair from the senior so that they couldn't sit in it, and it was intentional. In any case, the times that I've seen physical elder abuse, it's typically because of frustration. That doesn't mean that it can't just happen, but again, most of the times that I've seen it involves a senior that has some kind of medical issue, whether it's dementia or they're not mobile and they need a lot of help, and the caregiver, whether it's a independent caregiver or the family member caregiver, get really frustrated, and so they take it out. So what can you do in those cases? That's certainly not an excuse, but respite care can be really, really helpful. Respite care can be available through long-term care insurance. It can be available through hospice. There's a lot of ways that you can get some kind of respite care. And in case you don't know what respite care is, it's like a break. It is so hard and so stressful to take care of really anybody that's dependent on you for their everyday needs. And you're not wrong if you need a break. The really important part is to take that break before something really bad happens, like you lose your cool and there is some kind of abuse situation that results. So if you are the senior or you are the caregiver or you are a neighbor, a friend, or another family member, and you're seeing that the person that's providing care is getting a little bit worn out, needs a break, man, give them a break or give them the tools or the resources so that they can get that respite care to take their mental break before something happens. So physical abuse, we can certainly prevent it by stepping in and intervening and removing the senior from the situation that's causing harm. But we can also go in and get elder abuse restraining orders specifically to prevent that abuser from coming in contact. Or one of the more complex situations is like a child that's physically abusing a parent. Parent really wants to continue to see their child. So while a restraining order might be the necessary tool, how can we make it the least restrictive so that, mom can still see her son? Because that's also very important. We want to, of course, always maintain the relationship if we can, as long as it's safe and helpful. So we can tailor elder abuse restraining orders to anything that we want to do, even when it's physical abuse. But now let's get to the others, emotional and financial. There's, of course, sexual abuse, neglect, things like that. I'm not going to get into those too much, but obviously we have the same restraining orders. You can always call the police, and you definitely should. But we're going to focus now on financial and emotional abuse. So the most common abusers are family members, caregivers, whether that's in home or in a nursing facility or an assisted living or rehab center, the family members that are caregivers for the same reasons that I said before. There's financial advisors and legal representatives, or just strangers out there on the internet abyss. Those tend to be more for financial abuse, less for emotional abuse. So if we're going to look at these two different things, emotional abuse is more isolation, manipulation, restricting visits, right? Things like that are going to have an emotional impact on the elder or the senior, and it's interfering with their safety, health, welfare, and all of the things. So the most common people for that are going to be family members that are caregivers, and then caregivers. It's less likely that we're going to have like a financial advisor or a stranger come in and do emotional abuse. One, because you need to have inside information, but also those typically seem to be more of the financial abuse. Financial abuse is where you're trying to benefit financially from this person, the senior, where you otherwise wouldn't. So it can be everything from, these are some examples that I've actually litigated and dealt with. It can be as simple as somebody coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm going to be your companion, and let's go to the wineries every day for dinner," and have the senior pay for all of those. I once had a situation where there was a caregiver who always wanted to go to Target, and the senior never got out of the assisted living. So they were very excited to go on these like field trips to Target. And in exchange, the caregiver would say, "Well, I'm taking you here, so I need a few things. So why don't you buy them for me?" That was also considered a form of financial abuse. We see large amounts of money being taken. I've seen houses actually being redeeded to somebody else. That can be financial elder abuse. Having a will altered or a trust altered or changed so that you inherit where you otherwise wouldn't. That's a really common form of financial elder abuse. This is very common, again, between caregivers and family members. And the key for the will or the trust trigger that I look for is, would they normally have inherited, right? So a caregiver that's not related would never inherit unless there was a will. You may not know that, but I'm telling you that, right? So if there's a will or some kind of bequest, some kind of transfer document that says they're going to inherit when this senior dies, now they're getting something that they ordinarily wouldn't. For a child, children typically inherit, right? So if there's a child and they would normally get 50% of the assets, and now all of a sudden they convinced mom or dad to amend their will so they're getting 75 or 100%, now they're getting more than they would have. And so it is something that can lead me to look into it more, if you will, to see if there was some kind of financial elder abuse or exploitation going on. What else have I seen? Oh, I've seen cars being purchased, Costco dollars, $5,000 a month at Costco. I've seen financial scams. I would say of all of them, in my experience, they're the least common, but you think of those as like the Prince of Egypt who's calling and saying, "Please help me, I really need some money." Those are financial scams. One that seems to be on the rise as I sit here today in 2025 are romantic scams targeting seniors. And these seem to be very successful, where we have a surviving spouse, either because their spouse passed away, or because their spouse was recently moved into a memory care or some kind of assisted living facility. And so that what I'm going to call the surviving spouse, the one that's still well, is really lonely and is grieving and is very susceptible. So they start going online, as many people do, and they meet somebody that fills in their loss. It could be romantic promises, or it could just be companionship, but it's text messaging and phone calls and all of these things that fill in this emotional space for a relationship that was just lacking due to the death or putting their spouse into some kind of care facility. So then what happens? They're thinking they're in this relationship with a long-term person. It's totally fake and it's fraud. And that person starts asking for money, and money starts to be transferred. That's a really, really hard scam to overcome. One, because you're dealing with somebody's emotional space. So many of the seniors that I've seen go through this kind of financial scam and abuse don't want to admit that it's going on. They cannot fathom that this is not a real true love situation. So we're dealing with emotion and this denial, absolute total denial that there is a fake person out there. And then you're also dealing with the scam. And many of these scams are not rooted in the US. So how are you ever going to go and trace money? I once had somebody tell me that their dad was the survivor, had been recently widowed, went online. I don't even know if it was an app, but probably it was, and started talking to this woman. The dad had phone calls. They text messaged for a very long time. Dad talked or saw this woman on the camera. So dad was very, very convinced that this was a real person. But he was also wary because he'd heard the scams. So when this woman started talking about how she was having financial difficulty, he was really impressed, actually, that she never asked him for money. He was like, oh man, maybe this isn't a scam. I mean, she's real. She's totally real, because if it was a scam, she'd be asking me for money. So she didn't. She didn't ask for money. And then a couple months later, she asked him to send a Zelle of $1 just to test it. And he's like, oh, it's only $1. He still had these red flags sort of waving in the background, but he's like, it's only $1. If she was trying to scam me, it would be no big deal. So he sends the $1 and she sends it right back. And she's like, thanks so much. My Zelle is working. And he's like, oh, this is like totally a real person. Like, she gave me my money back. And they're chatting, and he's getting nighttime texts and the whole thing, videos, the whole nine. Not sexual, though. We're not talking sex videos. We're talking only companionship videos. But he was getting very, very emotionally reliant on her. And then, I don't know how many months in, it might have been 4 months in, she says, I'm not interested in seeing you anymore. I'm sorry. I just can't do this long-term thing. So he's totally convinced now that she's a real person, because she just broke up with him and he hasn't given her a dime. Cool. Dad's very sad, but it's cool. Then 2 weeks after that, she reaches out and she's like, oh my gosh, I made a huge mistake. I realized that, like, I just really love you. I'd like to meet you in person. Let's plan this. And he's like, oh, because he really missed her too. So he said, okay, true story, guys, true story. So then he starts planning everything, sets it all up. He's so excited. She asks for like $40. At this point, he is so not thinking it's a scam because of this entire history. He sends it. And he's also like, and it's only $40. She's coming out like, what's $40? I love this woman. She takes 40. She promises she'll pay him back. Then she can't afford her rent, or she needs some more money. So he sends her a little bit more. And she's like, but don't worry, like, here is my bank account. So she sends pictures of her bank account to him. And he's like, yeah, the money's there. Like, she doesn't need the money. This pattern of behavior, promises to come out, plans to be made. She would send small amounts back on a payment plan, but ask for continually larger. By the end of a year and a half, Dad had sent over $150,000 to this woman. and had received, I think, a total of payments back in the amount of like $2,500. So there were payments made, but he was way out. He was thinking about refinancing his house because she needed some more money to get her to the United States because there was some legal issues and barriers that were going on. So he was going to refinance his house. And it was only when dad's daughter got notified because she was like the power of, I don't know, there was somebody somewhere that decided daughter needed to be notified, and daughter was notified, and she came in and she was like, what are you doing? He'd spent all of his liquid assets and he was getting ready to refinance for this woman. When daughter got involved, she then went in and had an investigator look. Everything was artificial intelligence. It was not traceable because it was outside of the United States. Dad was never able to recover the cash that he'd sent over, but at least we saved his house. Thank goodness. Dad was totally in denial. As I sit here today, I bet Dad doesn't completely understand that it was a scam and that that woman didn't really exist as the woman he thought, and that he's never going to get his $150,000 back. So anyway, that is a story, just an interesting story. I think it's, a sad but fun one of these financial scams that can happen, but really we can't do anything about it. Report it to the FBI, report it to law enforcement, all of that, but we can't. What are we going to do? Those are scams, though, that can sometimes result, if they happen, in being able to get some kind of conservatorship in place, because really it did seem at that point that Dad was very susceptible to undue influence and was unable to make some decisions that were important to him. We did end up getting a conservatorship, so good thing. It was needed, and we were able to keep Dad in his house and live a long life. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen or that he wasn't emotionally hugely affected. Let's take a quick break. If you're navigating the twists and turns of divorce, you might be wondering, getting divorced, now what? That's actually the title of my upcoming book, designed to guide you through the challenging and emotional process of divorce. It's packed with real-life stories, expert tips, and motivational insights to empower you every step of the way. While it's not available just yet, you can join the waitlist to make sure you don't miss out. Head over to rachelkingattorney.com to sign up to be the first to get a copy and enter to win a free signed copy as soon as it releases. Arm yourself with the knowledge to move forward confidently through this challenging time. Now let's get back to the show. Let's get back to the other parts. We're talking financial elder abuse when it comes to the people that are closest, because really, quite frankly, it's the most common. And though I litigate in probate, I would say that trying to get inheritance is probably right up there, whether it's a house or money or something. So what do you look for? Well, if you're the senior or you're somebody around the senior, you're going to look for changes in behavior. Are they being isolated? Can you make contact with the senior and visit and call freely, unsupervised? Are there unexplained withdrawals? One flag that we got was that a senior's debit card got declined when they were at a grocery store and they had no idea why, and that unfolded a huge amount of financial elder abuse. So is a senior saying, oh my gosh, I don't really know why my account was overdrawn. I got a call from a bank. Missing belongings, updating wills and trusts, seeing attorneys when maybe they shouldn't be seeing attorneys, or changing attorneys. They've had an attorney for 30 years. All of a sudden they're going to a new one. Why? Poor hygiene, malnutrition, just things that are out of the norm are times to look into it. Why? One, it might just be the aging, natural aging process. It might be some kind of medical issue that needs to be looked at that isn't actually abuse, but just needs to be addressed. Or it could also be that there is some kind of abuse. So instead of just assuming that it's the aging process, be proactive and look. You can always always report to Adult Protective Services, call law enforcement. Many of the counties that I work with, the DA's office has like a whole elder abuse section. The FBI has an elder abuse section. You can make reports to law enforcement. You can make reports to ombudsmen, which are specifically for seniors that live in like assisted livings or some kind of care facility. Speak up. If it is another family member, see what's going on. If it's not a family member, go talk to other family members. Talk to an attorney, see what your rights are, what the rights of the senior are. Let's get some background information sooner rather than later. Let's see what is happening if we can flush it out. Because it's always easier to prevent than it is to fix. Certainly, if there's physical elder abuse, we want to get in and prevent anything horrible from happening physically. If it's emotional elder abuse, we want to get in and stop the deterioration of the relationships that the senior has, maybe with kids or family members or friends. And if it's financial, we want to go in and stop it before all the money is gone. It is so hard to go in and recapture money that has been taken, because oftentimes the people that steal it are judgment proof. You're going to, again, report. And then if it does seem that this is some kind of elder abuse that we need to intervene on, we can get restraining orders, we can get conservatorships, we can go in and try and recover the property that was taken. We can do a lot of things if we get into it, and sooner is always better. I would say a couple dozen times a year, I get calls from people that say my mom or my dad died, and 10 years ago, X, Y, and Z happened. Sister took all of the money, started isolating. I didn't want to take issue with it while mom and dad were alive because I didn't want to cause them stress of their kids fighting. But now they're deceased, and I want to go after sister. That is so hard. It happened so long ago. If there is abuse, let's not wait. Let's go in and stop the abuse. And maybe even a better option is to prevent the abuse to the extent that you can. Setting up powers of attorneys, watching behavior, really keeping those open lines of communication, checking in. If you're not available to check in, maybe you have a neighbor or a friend pop in. Putting protocols in place so that you can be made aware of concerning behaviors or changes in advance is really, really a great idea. If you suspect yourself or anybody that you know of being the victim or potential victim of any kind of elder abuse, physical, emotional, or financial, speak up. Reach out to law enforcement. Talk to an attorney. Call APS. There are a ton of resources that are available. Don't sit in silence. I love to hear all of the stories, especially success stories, because if there is a way that we can restore a house to a senior who was getting evicted from their own property after the deed was changed, true story. Fortunately, we were able to stop it. Let's talk about it. Let's not make financial elder abuse or physical elder abuse taboo anymore. We're trying to open up these lines of communication, spread the word so that we can all see it. Because if we can help one senior age gracefully, keep their dignity, and maintain all of the relationships and the finances that they've worked so hard over their lifetime to create, man, that's doing good. That wraps up another episode of Gavels Down, Voices Up. If you found value in our discussion today, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs these insights. Your engagement helps us grow and impact more lives. I'm Rachel King, thanking you for listening and reminding you to speak up, because every voice deserves to be heard.